The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round again, the years keep rolling by.
Top of the day. I'm Joe Doolittle.
And good evening. I'm Kate Dudding.
And this is Story by Story.
We changed that. Celebrating the human spirit.
Well, I'd rather be celebrating myself.
Yes.
And by the way, before I forget, let me be the first to wish you a happy Thanksgiving, because this is coming to you in November.
That's true, but we haven't. In reality, we haven't. And your
Turkey time.
Turkey time. But we haven't gotten to Halloween yet in terms of actual reality.
Right.
So that's why I kind of looked at him. Right. First to wish me, and a happy Thanksgiving to you too.
I just thought I'd start with that. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
And we use this hour to share with you some of the background and goings-on about storytelling, the oldest art form in the world.
Definitely. Except some musicians will quibble with you, but it's... I think they did the pictures before.
And artists, too, because there's people drawing on the rocks, and then there were people pounding the rocks. But I think there were people sitting on the rocks first. That's what I think.
Around the campfire going, I took my little spear and I got that whole big woolly mammoth.
That's
all by
right.
myself.
That's right. See, so his stories are wonderful because you can place them in any time that you want, even time that you didn't even live. And you can project them into the future. Mm-hmm. And you can share them with friends. You can share them with friends that you don't even know yet. You can share them with people that you have yet to meet on a subway car or a bus.
Or crossing the street.
That's right. Because I've shared stories in almost all of those places.
Mm-hmm. Last time I was in the post office, and a new clerk looked at my return address label, Kate Dudding, storyteller. You're a storyteller? Oh, yes. When I was a little boy, storytellers that's another name for liars. I said, well, no, I'm not that. I
don't exchange the truth all the time.
Never let the truth stand in the way of a good story.
Thank you. One of the questions I'd like to ask Kate when I'm not wishing her happy Thanksgiving is, what's the most interesting thing that she's been doing related to storytelling? And it's probably more than going to the post office.
Yes. I was hoping you would ask. Last week, I shared my story, The Kindness of Strangers, Parisian style. And I got this story in exchange.
Whoa.
I told it at a nursing home where I volunteer once a month. And the activities director, who has never interrupted my program before, hustled up to the front of the room of 24 people and said, I have to tell you this. I have to tell you this. She said, when I was visiting the cemeteries in Normandy, mm-hmm. the World War II cemeteries, 2 men came up to me and said, American? And I said, yes. And then they took off their hats, held them over their hearts, and sang the Star-Spangled Banner in French.
Whoa. Wow.
So I thanked her for sharing that story, and I said, I have to share that with a friend of mine, Elizabeth Ellis,
right.
whose father died on the Normandy beaches when she was just a baby.
Oh.
He had volunteered. He was a college professor. He volunteered, even though he was married and had 2 children. And there he was killed. And of course, their lives changed forever. That their mother, Elizabeth's mother, brought them up on the salary of a lunch lady in the elementary school. Mm-hmm. But I have to tell Elizabeth that her father's sacrifice and her family's sacrifice are remembered in France to this day.
That's a great story. And Elizabeth Ellis, for those of you who are not close followers of our program, is a very famous, nationally known storyteller who visits us once or twice a year and is renowned for the ability to tell a down-home story, but also to encourage and teach other storytellers. So we're ever in her debt, and we'd like to share good stories with her. So that's great.
What about you?
Oh, life has been a blur, but it's the way it always is, and it's probably better than being bored. I had a nice experience. You know, my church, the First Reformed Church in Schenectady, has started a word service. It's the second Friday of the month, which usually is a challenge for me because I have Shawnee evenings at the Irish Museum that night. But there was a flip in the schedule, so I got to participate. And I got to tell a story about one of my chaplain stories. And I won't, it's too long to tell now, but I'll try to find a way to weave it into one of our topics. The story is, I sing to my patients all the time. And it's a great story. And it kind of is a wonderful segue about singing and songs.
And you see, Joe is a volunteer chaplain?
Yes, at Albany Medical Center, yeah. And so that's something.
At first I thought you meant the 4 chaplains at your church.
Right.
Well,
right,
one of them was from
one of them
your
was
church.
from our church. Yeah, there's a lot of stories at this old church that goes back 320 years or so. But the thing about music and songs is one of my favorite, and our favorite, storytellers, songsters, educators, and all-around good people is Sandy Schuman, and he is our guest storyteller and songster.
Yes, indeed. Welcome, Sandy.
Welcome, Sandy Schuman.
Wow, I didn't know who you were talking about there until you...
Well, it's a good thing I was talking about you because you're sitting right here at the table. You know. But it's great to have you here because for those of you who don't know Sandy, he had a great career in the New York State Rockefeller Institute as a writer and facilitator and generally a guy who could get things done, and has been a storyteller, I think, probably since you were a kid.
That's a fair statement.
Yeah.
I'll go for that.
But I don't know about the music stuff. Did you pound on the table or on the oatmeal box, or how did the music stuff start?
I was hornswoggled, forced,
Now that's a good
cajoled, whatever, into learning the trumpet. I received a gift at the age of 5, and it looked a big box, you know.
Oh.
Little kid, wow, this is exciting. Was on the kitchen floor, and I'm eagerly opening up this box. I don't know what it is, and it's there's a box inside the box, a case, brass clips. I open it up. It's a cornet. I had no idea what this thing was, and 3 years later, at the age of 8, on January 1st, my father started giving me trumpet lessons. So that was my introduction to music. I never really loved the trumpet. And talk about blurs, how exactly I got interested in the guitar came through an interest in folk music, which I really liked because they told stories. And unlike other kinds of music, you know, pop music, opera, classical music, whatever, you know, you had to be quiet and then there was the music. But folk music performers typically tell a story, and then they sing the song, and then they tell a story after the song. So I was kind of into it for the stories, but I didn't really, you know, figure that out until later. Folk music, my first experience learning to play the guitar was abysmal. You know, you have to be a contortionist. It can't be done. Forget it. And then I could launch into another story. I better hold it off right there.
And you have calluses on your fingers these days?
I do have calluses on my fingertips. I have no nails on this hand and long nails on that one. And
you don't tip over?
I do tip over.
I do tip over.
Yeah.
But not because he has long nails on the short nails.
Well, yeah. We needn't talk about that.
it's kind of a sideline, but in terms of your avocation as a folk singer, we have a folk singer who just got a Nobel Prize, which I thought was quite extraordinary when that happened, and I think it's a wonderful testimony to the very things that you were talking about in terms of having a person who could make music telling the story of a generation and be recognized for that. And some of your work is kind of in that genre, I would think. What I remember.
Again, I'm expecting the Nobel Prize any day
Well,
now.
I didn't want to push you on that, but I figured you were up for it.
Yeah.
I figured you're up for it.
In literature.
In literature, they don't give one in music. They don't give a Nobel Prize in music.
But it would be possible for peace.
Yeah, it would be a stretch for peace.
Well, not for Bob Dylan. I'm thinking for somebody else. The singing, none so much. But I mean, you see, if the Dalai Lama sang.
Look, you guys got yourselves into this.
Okay.
You figure out how to get out.
Moving right
And
along.
we're gonna get ourselves out of it right now. I just
Yes.
thought it was an interesting thing to kind of
Yes.
segue into some of
But back to
Sandy's
Sandy.
material. And Sandy, one of the things that I've admired about your work is that you tend to be able to bring a song to a performance or a gathering, and in addition to the music, you tell a story of the song or the composer. And there's so much rich material there. And that kind of says you have a little bit of an inquiring mind about the nature of what it takes to come up with a song, what it takes to develop and write a song. Do you write a lot of your own material?
In the story, yeah. I have done a lot of research just gathering the underlying facts, and not with an intent, because I don't really know this stuff. I'm just learning it. Actually, the relevant incident here is the word plays show that we did that was called Stormy Weather.
Right, I remember.
You remember that one? Okay. So I was scheduled to tell a story. I had proposed a story about my dog who could not tolerate thunder and would jump out of windows and into other people's houses, and that was my plan. The story just wasn't coming together, and so I knew the title was Stormy Weather, and I had this inspirational thought: how about telling a story about the song Stormy Weather? I didn't really know anything about what that would be. I just figured that might be interesting, and that's when I checked with you guys, and that's when I learned that you, Joe Doolittle, were going to tell a story about stormy weather. So that kind of ditched that idea, but I built on it and ended up doing a story written by the music of which was written by the same guy, and that's really what caused me to do the research and what opened up this world of stories about songs and the people who wrote them. And in particular, what I've stumbled into is some of the best known songs written by some of the least known songwriters.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a flavor to some of these, except of course if we're talking about George and Ira Gershwin, they get a lot of press.
They get a lot of press. But I do remember now the stormy weather thing, and I must say, after hearing your other story, I wish I'd done something else that let you. But I'm sorry about that. Sometimes it's just a show.
I still have that story about stormy weather.
Don't know why there's no sun up in the sky, stormy weather. Well, I love that song. Actually, another song.
So I think it's time. Do you have a story or song to share with us
Yeah,
today?
funny you should ask.
Funny.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I'll drink to that.
I'll do it.
All right, so at the risk of making mistakes, I marvel at the fact that people, performers play the guitar and they don't make mistakes. It's like, how did that happen?
How's that happen? Yeah.
Right, exactly. And moreover, Playing a guitar has always been a challenge for me. Singing has always been a challenge for me. Singing and playing at the same time, you know.
Boy, have we brought you something
That's
today,
right.
folks. I'll tell you.
You know, listen at your own risk. So let me tell you a story about Harold Arlen. Harold was born and raised in Buffalo, New York. He was the son of the cantor at the local synagogue. And at an early age, he loved singing. At age 9, he was already a member of his father's choir. Loved to sing, learned how to play the piano, had a talent for it. His parents were not all that happy that he liked pop music, jazz. They would have preferred that he stuck with the liturgical music. He started a band, the Snappy Trio, and they got gigs, they worked, they made some money, and in fact, he did so well, kind of upgrading his band, and eventually joined the Buffalodians, the hottest, the coolest dance band in Buffalo, and they worked as often as they wanted, every day of the week, and he made good money. He quit high school so that he could pursue this musical career as a performer, as a singer and a piano player. And while his former classmates in high school are saving up their 25 cents allowance, he bought the first Model T Ford in his neighborhood. Well, the Buffalodians were doing so well that they thought perhaps they could make it in the big city. And they all went to New York. They had some time booked performances, and things were going sufficiently well that they could have made it, except for the infighting that happened. And there's some weird story about the leader of the Buffalodians running into Harold Arlen's closed fists. At any rate, the Buffalodians, for the most part, went back to Buffalo. Harold Arlen stayed in New York, rented a room, shared with another up-and-coming performer, and he got a job with a musical review called Great Day. This is not a play. This is a series of songs, dances, sketches. And Harold has one song to sing. He sings the song, accompanies himself on the piano. But he's at the rehearsals every day. This is months in advance of the opening of the show. The singers, the dancers, the chorus line. Of course, they don't have the full orchestra. When the review opens, they'll have a full orchestra, but during rehearsals, they just have the one pianist. And the pianist becomes ill. He asks Harold to sit in for him, take over as a rehearsal pianist. So, when you've got the conductor there and the whole orchestra, and you've got a chorus line, everybody's got to get in sync, and you got to know where the downbeat is. You got this conductor there, but rehearsal pianist, he can't wave his hands around. He's got to play the piano. So what does the rehearsal pianist do to get everybody in sync? And then he goes on with the song, the number, whatever it is. Harold's taken over this job. Here's the choreographer, the director. Harold, take it from the top. Harold, take it from the 12th measure. Well, Harold gets bored playing this little vamp over and over again, and he mixes it up a little bit. He might play well, Harry Warren happens to be sitting in on one of the rehearsals. Harry Warren later went on to write Chattanooga Choo Choo, the first song to go gold. We're in the Money, which you can hear on every day when the stock market is up. hundreds of songs, very successful. But at this point in time, he is the lowest level employee at Warner Publishing, a music publishing company. And he sees a lot of music. He plays the piano for people who are thinking about buying music. This is before, commercial radio and commercial recordings were so widely and readily available. So you went to a publisher, you heard the music, some guy would play it for you. That guy was plugging the songs. He was a plugger. He knew what would sell and what would stay on the shelf. He says to Harold, that noodling around you're doing on the piano, you ought to work that up into a full song. You might have something there. So Harold follows his advice, and Harry takes him over to the publishing company and introduces him to an established lyricist, the guy who writes the words for the songs, but who was currently in need of a partner. They would typically work in teams. One guy wrote the music, the other guy wrote the words. Ted Koehler listens to this song that Harold plays for him on the piano, and he says two words: get happy. And they work on it, and this is the song they wrote. Forget your troubles, come on, get happy. You better chase all your cares away. Sing hallelujah, come on, get happy. Get ready for the judgment day. The sun is shining, come on, get happy. The Lord is waiting to take your hand. Sing hallelujah, come on, get happy. We're going to the promised land. We're heading across the river, wash your sins away in the tide. It's all so peaceful on the other side. Forget your troubles, come on, get happy. You better chase all your cares away. Sing hallelujah, come on, get happy. Get ready for the judgment day. Get Happy, it was Harold Arlen's first big hit, written with Ted Koehler in 1929. He was no longer just a singer and piano player. Now he was a composer.
Well,
Thank you.
so you sketched the history of kind of the 20s in an artful way, just with the nature of what was going on musically in New York and Buffalo. Great work, great work.
Right. I mean, I'm tempted sometimes to expand that story into the history of radio and recorded music, because at that time, the way songwriters made their money on sales of sheet music, not on sales of recordings, not on radio play. But,
and for player pianos.
Right, cutting
piano rolls.
Right, George Gershwin cut piano rolls, as did many of the fine piano players. And there's that whole part of the story.
Wow.
Which I only, what do you say, tangentially glanced over.
Skimmed across.
Right.
Well, although you basically hinted at it, so it's part of the story. You kind of sensed as you were telling the story that there was this whole other thing going on, and thing called radio and talking music and other applications. And you reminded us that in the early 20s, a piece of sheet music and a player piano roll was high tech.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's not within our lifetime, but it's not 100 years ago.
Right. I think too the learning to play the piano was a more common aspiration for parents, for their children, especially immigrant parents. I think that was seen as a way to enter American society. If you knew how to play the piano, you had something. You had some social capital, and I know that that's how a piano came into the Gershwin household. I'm not really sure if that's
it's also because Mrs. Gershwin's sister, Kate, had gotten a piano.
It was Keeping Up with Kate. Huh?
Yes.
But in your family, it was a cornet.
Right. Well, I do have a story about our family piano,
Oh,
but
you do?
then that would be another story.
I have a story about my family piano.
Yeah. We my sister needed a piano for college. She was a music major. She's an oboist, but as a music major, you have to know how to play the piano, and so we scanned the One Ad Digest, the Penny Saver, whatever it was called, looking for used pianos, and I don't know how many we went and saw. These huge upright pianos, ebony, massive instruments, and you could buy a piano for $50. They want, take it away, we'll pay you. We finally found one that my father thought was good, right price, good sound, very playable, didn't need any repairs. Brought my mother over to see it, and she sees this huge monstrosity. And that was the last time we looked at an upright piano. We ended up buying a studio upright, which one of my sisters still has. Yeah, much smaller, more delicate looking, and that became our family piano.
Well, my father worked a half a mile from where we lived, so he often came home for lunch. And he came home in August once, and my mother hay fever had hit her. And so her eyes were itchy, her nose was running, she was just a hurting little puppy. And he said, Seal, why don't you go out and buy something? This was 1955. He was thinking, hat. She was thinking, there's a Tanglewood sale at the Baldwin Piano Shop. So that's where she went. And that's how we got a spinet, an acrosonic. And I liked it because the C in acrosonic was right over middle C.
Oh, talk about
Clever.
Clever. That's true. I was one of those kids who was supposed to play the piano, so I'd acquire social grace. Didn't work. But my oldest kid, is a pretty good musician, and he learned to play the piano. And then when he got his own family, he wanted a piano. And so he showed up one day and told his family he bought a piano he saw in the window of a piano store. It was a used spinet, pretty piano, but it's still big, and his wife was not pleased, but it came home. And he turned to his 4-year-old daughter and he said, Eleanor, I play the piano. You're going to play the piano? And she says, no, I'm not. I want to play the harp. And so her younger sister has learned to play. She still plays the harp, but she's taught herself how to play the piano because, as your sister knew, if you get into music, you got to know the piano. And I made a comment once to her now that she's 14. I said, "You play pretty well." She says, "Yeah, not too bad for not having a lesson." So there you go. And
anyways, okay. So it's time for the coming attractions. I think
we have a lot of stuff going on in storytelling, and you're going to be interested in it. And here it is.
Dun, 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 dun. Oh my goodness, look at November 1st, Sandy Schuman is going to be at First Tuesday's Tales and Stuff at Arthur's in the Stockade, 7 o'clock.
And that's a very quaint and wonderful little space to perform in, to listen in. You can come a little early before 7 and sign up if you want to sing, play, read a poem, or read a story. And you can buy a very nice dinner if you so choose too. So it's a great, great time. Thanks, Sandy, for gracing us with your presence. And there may be a story or two about songs and songwriters there.
Almost exclusively, according to plan.
According to plan. Thanks.
Plans being what they are.
You can bring your story, song, or poem, spoken word that can touch on that topic or maybe not.
Any topic.
Yeah, any topic. Then the following Sunday, at November 6th at 2 p.m., at Story Circle at Proctor's, we'll be doing one of their wordplay programs. Waterloo is the topic of people who have seen their Waterloo and perhaps lived through it successfully, unlike Napoleon. when that was the last time he was free, and then he was out in Elba for the rest of his life.
And it's interesting because his Waterloo was actually the second time around, and the guy that beat him the first time beat him the second time. And I'm going to tell a story about the guy who invented boots, Wellington.
Wellington boots. Okay, I was almost there. Almost there. And then we'll have other stories by Betty Cassidy, Bonnie Mayan, Elliot Nieves, Barbara Palumbo, and Joe Peck. Undoubtedly a story from the farm.
Waterloo, the battlefield was near a farm, I think.
Or the problems you can run into running a farm. Then on Wednesday, November 9th, we'll have the storytelling open mic up in Saratoga, and the featured teller will be Tom Weekly, who was sat in that very chair. And Cafe Lena is undergoing a massive renovation. It's not quite ready yet. So the nice people at the Spring Street Gallery are hosting the storytelling open mic that night. So it's several blocks away. Lovely little place, former church.
And Tom Weekly is renowned. He's been here on our show. He's in his 80s. He retired from storytelling after retiring from a successful business, and we didn't think that was appropriate, that he should not be feted, so we had a big party 6 or 7 years ago at Cafe Lena, and we have once more dragged him out of retirement to entertain us and to teach us more about storytelling. So if you're looking to have a good time and enjoy storytelling, make that one on your list.
Or, that very same night at the very same time, the Interfaith Story Circle program will be, the topic is Stories of Immigration, with a guest teller of Linda Feldman at the Blessed Sacrament Church on Central Avenue in Albany.
We should point out that the Interfaith Story Circle is a partner guild. Some of us are in both guilds. And it's also linked from our website, and you can find out more about it. It is maybe it isn't linked. All right,
Interfaith Story. Well, on the slide, the interfaithstory.org/Tri-City.
It's a wonderful venue. The meetings rotate in various faith communities, and if you're interested in doing something with storytelling in your faith community, one of the things you might think about is hosting one of those programs. It's a great opportunity for fellowship and learning, and a lot of great sharing.
Yeah. Gert Johnson started this over 20 years ago with the belief that the more people of faith shared their stories, the more they would find how much they have in common. And one of my new stories is about the Golden Rule. And it isn't just a Christian idea at all. There's a Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim, Baha'i, Jewish, they're all pretty much the same thing. So, and then on Shawnee evening, the second Friday of the month, at the Irish American Heritage Museum on Broadway in Albany,
there'll be Thanksgiving stories. Thanksgiving stories from Ireland.
And the tellers to be determined.
Tellers are still being lined up, but it's going to be a great evening. And there you get soda bread and Irish gold butter and great coffee, and it's a wonderful evening of just kind of relaxed listening and story sharing.
Excellent. Then we'll be meeting right here at the Colonie Town Library on Tuesday, November 15th, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. for sharing stories under development. You can bring a new story, and if you like, you can get feedback. If you don't want feedback, if it's just too new, or if it's really you just wanted to practice it one more time in front of some actually live people who give you facial expressions and body language, it's whatever you want. But telling, not reading. Referring to an outline, yeah. Reading large passages, no.
Many of the storytellers in the region have started their way into storytelling by sitting in to our monthly gatherings. It's a great place to get acquainted, to get familiar, and to try it out.
And I personally have received some wonderful comments and suggestions from both of these gentlemen. They're both very insightful and can just say, well, you know, I'm a little, I was a little confused here, or have you thought about this? And no, I will. And then sometimes I go, but other times I go, yeah, I need a little tweak right there. So that's what feedback's about. Then our friend Janet Carter, member of our guild, lives in Saugerties, and she has a monthly program there, the third Friday of the month, at the Inquiring Minds bookstore. I just love that name of the bookstore.
And it's such a great space, too. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Lovely wooden floors. There's a little coffee shoppy counter. Wonderful cookies. And then we will have one of the highlights of our storytelling season each year. This time it's our 21st annual Telebration, which are stories for adults that are told the weekend before Thanksgiving all across the country and in some other countries as well. And our topic this month, or this year rather, is It Ain't Necessarily So. All of our programs at Proctor's this year are song titles from Broadway shows. So,
and we should point out that one of our community outreaches is that $2 of every ticket for our wordplay shows goes to support the Schenectady Intercity Ministries Summer Lunch Program. And so if you want to get involved in a good storytelling program with a very positive spin on it, please think about bringing yourself and some friends to Telebration.
Not only that, but the money we raise from Telebration has funded, we're now up to 100 storytelling events in area libraries, museums, house concerts, whatever, 100. So we've taken these 20 performances and spun them out into 100.
Wow, great.
So that's due to the generosity of our tellers, because no one gets paid for Telebration.
And Telebration, therefore, is a benefit squared, or actually tripled, because there's the benefit for storytelling, the benefit for SICM, and your benefit as a listener.
A win-win-win?
Win-win-win, yes.
And Sandy will be telling, I will be telling, as well as Claire Beadlestone. I think all these people have been on our show. Claire Beadlestone, Fran Berger, Kent Bushman, Betty Cassidy. I should read their names rather than looking at their faces. Betty Cassidy, Adam Hoffman, Christy Keegan, Elliot Nieves, Joe Peck, and Karen Pilsworth, the storyteller laureate from Kingston, is once again graciously going to be our MC. Though when Sandy did it, he was very good too. But she really likes to do it. So.
And the audience seems to like her too.
Yes, yes, these are all charming people. Most storytellers really are nice people. And they do stop talking now again and listen too. They understand that sort of back and forth balance.
Was that a segue that maybe we should listen to Sandy again?
Well, I guess that is.
That would be a good idea.
Yeah, we have about 20-some minutes left.
Well, I'll try and keep my story under 20 minutes.
That would be appreciated.
That would be good. If you look at any piece of sheet music of a song written by Yip Harburg, you'll see that it says words by E.Y. Harburg. E.Y. Harburg. But everybody called him Yip. And everybody asks, how did he get the name Yip? You were going to ask that.
I was going to ask that, yeah.
I preempted your asking. So I know of two explanations of how he got the nickname Yip. One is that as a youngster, he was a ball of energy. He was fast on his feet. He would run around like a little squirrel. And so he got the nickname Little Squirrel. In Yiddish, Yipsel.
Yes.
Now, one variation of that story is that his friends started calling him Yipsel or Yip. Another variation, his mother called him Yipsel. The only problem with that story is that the word for little squirrel in Yiddish is vevrikele. It's a good story, though. The other explanation I've heard is that as a teenager, as a young adult, he was very active in the Young People's Socialist League, the YPSL. If you try to pronounce those initials, YPSL, you get Yipsel. And so he became known as Yipsel, Yip. His friends would refer to him as the Yipper. He was a co-owner in the 20s, back in the 20s again, of the Consolidated Electrical Appliance Company. Now think, in the 20s, the roaring 20s, electricity is still kind of a new thing, and most households did not have electricity. You had to add that in. And instead of taking the rugs out onto the line and beating them, you wanted a vacuum cleaner. Instead of washing clothing in the tub with the washboard, you wanted a washing machine. And instead of having that ice box and the ice man delivering, you wanted an electric refrigerator. The electric appliance business was very good to Yip Harburg and his co-owners. All through the 20s, of course, until 1929. The crash, Yip loses the business. He's tens of thousands of dollars in debt, and he has no way forward. He's got a wife and 2 kids. What's he going to do? He talks to an old high school friend. They went to Townsend High School together. They went to City College of New York together. When Yip went into business selling appliances, his friend went into the songwriting business with his younger brother, George. So I'm talking about Ira Gershwin. He and Yip went to school together, and while in school, they wrote for the school newspaper. They wrote, little articles, funny little stories, light verse, and in fact, they were so good at it that some of their pieces were published in the regular newspapers. And so Ira says, Yip, you ought to try your hand at songwriting. You could do this. It's not that different from light verse, lyrics. And he goes further and gives him some money to, keep him going, and introduces him to Jay Gorney, a composer who had already had some success, was established, knew the business. So Jay Gorney and Yip Harburg team up, and they have a successful show in 1929, Earl Carroll's Sketchbook, and it helps Yip get the next job. 1932, one of the Schubert brothers wants to revive a successful musical revue from 1926. It's called Americana. Going to have some new songs in it. Going to make some money. So it's...
Speak for yourself, guitar.
Yeah. It's booked to open in October of 1932. And, the way they would do shows then, I suppose, same thing now. You've got an opening date set, and you back up from there, and you start with the writers, songwriters, sketch writers, and then you get into performers, and then you have the rehearsals, and you put the whole show together, and it opens. Vincent Youmans, this is, T for two, two for T, that Vincent Youmans is hired as the composer who's going to write the music. Yip is going to write the lyrics. They're on a schedule. Vincent Youmans writes the music for the opening number and disappears, takes the money and runs. And Yip is under contract. He's in a bind now. He's responsible for writing the lyrics. He's got nobody to write the music. So he scrambles, and because they're now behind schedule, he hires Jay Gorney, with whom he'd been writing anyway. He hires Harold Arlen, who had his big hit a few years earlier, and now with Ted Koehler was writing songs for the Cotton Club. He hires Burt Lane, and he hires another lyricist, a young fellow from Georgia named John Mercer. You might recognize his better-known name, Johnny Mercer, not a big stretch. And they write all the songs for this show, Americana. As I said before, the way these guys made their money was not just from being paid to write the songs for the show. The royalties that they got from sheet music sales and eventually from recordings, that was the bread and butter. Unfortunately, none of the songs from this show became popular, with one exception. I want to put you in the audience in 1932, and you're going to hear this song in the middle of the show. But anyone in that audience in October of 1932 would have known, one, presidential election is coming up. The Democratic candidate for president is the governor of New York, Franklin Roosevelt. Franklin Roosevelt began his campaign in April of 1932 with a radio address broadcast from Albany, New York, in which he talked about the forgotten man. He laid out the fundamentals of an economic strategy to get out of the Great Depression. And what he said is, instead of focusing on the big banks and the big industrialists, we need to focus on the economic base of the pyramid, the economic pyramid, the common man, the farmers, the factory workers, the people who built the country with their hands, the forgotten man in terms of public policy. So the notion of the forgotten man, that phrase was well established, the idea of building the economy from the base of the pyramid, not from the top of the pyramid. Another thing that you would have known sitting in that audience in 1932, the veterans of World War I, in recognition of their service, had been given certificates which they would be able to cash in 1945 and receive some payment. On average, they would get $1,000 a piece, according to the amount of service that they had done during World War I. But given the Depression and these men are out of work, destitute, they wanted to cash in their certificates now, so they could get by. And as a demonstration to pressure Washington, they were camping out in a Hooverville in Washington, D.C. all summer long. So if you were in that audience in 1932, nobody had to tell you these facts. Nobody had to tell you that we were in a Great Depression. This is the song that became the anthem of the Great Depression. Once I built a railroad, I made it run, I made it race against time. Once I built a railroad, and now it's done. Brother, can you spare a dime? Once I built a tower way up to the sun of bricks and mortar and lime. Once I built a tower and now it's done. Buddy, can you spare a dime? Once in khaki suits, gee, we looked swell, full of that Yankee Doodle-dee-dum. 500,000 boots went slogging through hell, and I was the kid with the drum. Say, don't you remember? You called me Al, it was Al all the time. Say, don't you remember, I was your pal. Buddy, can you spare a dime?
Oh.
1932. Brother, Can You Spare a Dime? Words by Yip Harburg, music by Jay Gorney, the anthem of the Great Depression.
Sandy, that is just remarkable. And I was sitting here listening to you, and I had my historic hat on. And you know, the idea of this parade or this history of music that you've started or are on is extraordinary, and I think we have to find a place to have it play itself out. And in the wonder of television, at least we've got two of these songs down, so you've got them on record. But it's powerful stuff because you built a lot of history in a way that people could relate to. That if you said, I want to tell you a story about the Depression, they would go, yeah, you know. But it's really remarkable. It's great work, and I think you'll agree with me out there that it's great work.
It reminds me of the productions that have been done at Old Songs about two historical periods in New York State history.
The one about the rent wars and the one about the Civil War are two that I can remember.
But Brother, Can You Spare a Dime? Did FDR use that during his campaign?
Not that I know
Happy
of.
Days Are Here Again. I think Hoover used that.
Happy Days Are Here Again was written, the music was written by Jack Yellen when Harold Arlen was a teenager playing music. His father wanted to talk him out of it and figured, he was not going to listen to me. Maybe he'll listen to Jack Yellen. Jack Yellen wrote Happy Days Are Here Again, Ain't She Sweet, established music figure. So he sends Jack Yellen over to talk some sense into young Harold. And so he says, Harold, let me hear what you have here. And he finds him at some roadhouse in Buffalo playing the piano. And he hears Harold play all this music and sing. And he calls up his father and says, Sam, he's going to be a musician. It's your own fault.
When I think of Harold Arlen, I think of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. I think of Judy Garland. And The Wizard of Oz and Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Yip Harburg.
He wrote the words for Over the Rainbow.
He wrote, wasn't that a happy coincidence there, yeah. So, okay.
Yeah, I mean, Yip Harburg wrote songs with maybe 50 different composers. He wrote, 30, 40 in that range with Jay Gorney, with Burt Lane, with whom he wrote Finian's Rainbow. With Harold Arlen, he wrote 111. So they were big-time partners.
Dorothy Fields was the same sort of she wrote with Jerome Kern. They won an Oscar in '36 for Someday. Just the Way You Look Tonight. I hate those songs that have the title at the very end.
with your...
But she also worked with many other composers, and the last she did Sunny Side of the Street with somebody else, and Sweet Charity and Seesaw was her last musical. So she had a career that spanned like 50 years, which is a long run. Anyways, so we have just about 2 to 3 more minutes.
Let's just talk a little bit about our response is kind of from our generation. I'm older than Kate, but have you told these stories to folks and gotten some feedback similar to ours? I'm curious of what's happened to it.
Yes, in a word. I think what I find appealing about the stories is that there's a personal story, and then there's this bigger historical aspect to it. And I really like bringing both aspects into the story, and to the extent that you could just tell the story from the personal aspect, or you could tell it just from the historical aspect. I don't think it would be as interesting as putting them together.
It lends itself to a performance about this topic that we've got for Arthur's that maybe we could extend, and I'm sure you could do a whole performance on your own, but Kate does a number of things on music. I've got a couple. Dan Bergen has got more than a couple. I mean, we could put together thematically something, I would think, if we put our heads together, and so we need to put our heads together. I guess that's what I'm thinking.
Right. Well, I tell you, you know the story that I do called Song of the Century.
Yes, I do.
And the 2 stories that I just told, plus a few others, are all the long version, if you will, of Song of the Century, because there's Harold Arlen and Yip Harburg who end up writing the Song of the Century, with a few other characters along the way. And Harold Arlen and Ted Koehler wrote what we were singing before.
Your lovely
Stormy Weather, which is the marketplace report tune for when the market is down.
That's right.
Harry Warren wrote We're in the Money, the same Harry Warren who's advising Harold Arlen to write this music that becomes Get Happy. So there's all these pieces that fall together. Coincidentally, also in 1932, Yip Harburg is hired to write one song for a show being produced by Billy Rose. Make a long story short, that turns out to be It's Only a Paper Moon with Harold Arlen.
And this could go on for another hour.
We will bring another show back.
We must close for today. So thank you very much for joining us. We hope you'll join us again here, or even more especially at one of our live performances. I'm Kate Dudding.
I'm Joe Doolittle, and we hope you've enjoyed this hour as much as we have.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, but I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round again,